The thought that life could be better is woven indelibly into our hearts and our brains.
Well, hi, hello, and howdy, and welcome to another edition in our ongoing weekly podcast, Finding Yourself in Paradise. I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and this show we're going to focus on the self that you do find in paradise. And Michael, I've been thinking about thinking, and that's what I want to talk about. And I think that's what you want to talk about too, thinking about thinking.
Yeah, we have been discussing the nature of critical thinking lately because this is, well, actually as far back as the 1940s been discussed, but only recently are universities and colleges and fortunately high schools now beginning to teach critical thinking. I'd like to see it in the middle schools and grade schools, too.
Now, explain what you mean by critical thinking, because some people probably are thinking that's being critical.
Being
that's like,
critical,
yeah.
yeah.
What's critical thinking?
Well, yeah, it does have sort of a negative connotation to
Not
it.
real, not in the psychology world.
No.
But yeah, the word critical.
Yeah, it means many things. It means everything from the qualities of discernment and recognition and being aware of things to adjusting for bias and prejudice and accounting for your own subjective perception and projection of things. There's rational thinking, analyzing and evaluating, and there's a lot to critical thinking. But I brought it up because that's really not what we're going to talk about
Of course
today.
not.
We're going to go beyond critical thinking to talk about the nature of thinking, to think about thinking, and share some of our thoughts on thoughts.
There you go. Because that kind of thinking that you just described is not the whole picture. That's not everything there is when you really get down to what thinking actually is. And
It's just a piece of the picture, and I don't think, it's interesting the words we use now all of a sudden, I don't think, I'm thinking about thinking here, that in all my education, until I began to initiate my own self-help and self-improvement, personal development work, that anyone in traditional school at any level, even university, even in those philosophy classes where we studied logic, did they talk about thinking in quite the way that you and I are going to talk about it today?
I think that's true too. I've in fact, you and I never really talked about it the way we're talking about it earlier today, and now going to be talking about it on the podcast. We are thinking about thinking from sort of a new way of thinking about it. Let's start with this basic premise that everybody knows about what they call the stream of consciousness. But let's start with the premise that stream of consciousness is just one stream in an ocean, three-dimensional, infinite, if you will, an ocean of consciousness, and that any stream is like a current in that ocean, and that's the one going by us at any given time. So let's start with the idea of thoughts being an ocean of all the possible thoughts.
Yeah. And those familiar with philosophy may start making a list of which philosophers we're going to pull on. I'd suggest you don't even bother because this is common to the search for truth that is philosophy, to think about thinking, whatever word we have for it, ideation or conceptualization, or I have a friend who likes to say jokingly, well, I'll cogitate on it a bit. We're going to cogitate. There's so many ways of talking about this.
Ponder.
To consider that there is a consensus about certain things, and that in the wisdom of all cultures and all times, there is this sense, to lesser or greater degrees, depending on the culture, the religion, the philosophy, social mores and such, a sense that standing above us in some way, or within us, if you wish, is a set of knowable things, of thoughts that could be thought, most of which we'll never think, most of which we're not even aware of, because you have to be smart enough to recognize the concept. But even if we don't recognize it, even if we look for it and can't find it, doesn't mean it's not out there in this sometimes called rain cloud of knowable things.
Yeah, like where else would it come from? I mean, if you think about it, it's like all the stars in the universe kind of thing are out there, and the ones, most of them we'll never see and know, but they're out there. They are out there. But for us, what are the ones we see then? I mean, there's certain ones that we see. What causes those to be the seeable ones, if you will?
Well, the constellation of thoughts.
That's a nice metaphor, too.
So if you and I go out tonight, or if any of our listeners and participants go out in a starry night where there's perhaps no moon, a so-called new moon, and they're outside of the big city, and it's, gosh, the sky is just full of stars.
You mean they're finding themselves in paradise?
Something like that, yeah, and they lay back and look up at the stars. What will they think? Well, they're likely to think that I can find some organization in this set of all of these stars. In fact, oh, there's Orion, and oh gosh, there's the Big Dipper. Now, there's nothing about that. Yeah. Now, there's nothing about this particular set of stars that if a person hadn't been taught to look for it, oh, there's those 3 stars. Oh, yeah, that's Orion's belt, and there's this thing. I mean, if you hadn't been taught to look for it, right? Well, thoughts are like that. And so we have attitudes, we have belief systems, we have cultural mores, we have patterns of thought that we pick up beginning even before we're born, according to some research, but certainly as soon as we're born, we begin to recognize these constellations or patterns. And some people become fixated on them, and some people are, for whatever reason, willing to look off into parts of the sky that they're not familiar with.
So if it's all out there, all the thoughts, and really just allowing ourselves to open our consciousness or open our minds, if you will, to be able to pick anything we want, but what we seem to have as the stream flowing in front of us is what we're attracted to, what we care about. It really comes down to, like, it's a continuum, I think, of from total boredom, like not caring at all about something, to like being really, really passionate about it. And somewhere along that scope, we notice things in that stream flowing by, and if we notice it with just a tiny little bit of interest, we notice it for a few moments and it floats on by to the next thing. But if we notice it with a lot of interest, we're stuck there, and we're in focused passion, which is the name of our website, by the way. Focused passion. Focused passion is when out of that stream, you pick something because it really interests you and you go there.
Right. Whether it's positive or negative, it's the impact, the force, as you and I like to call it. If the idea is the energy, this is the force.
Yeah.
This could be the drive behind or the magnetic force that attracts you toward, depending on the model. But it's, what do you care about? What is the nature of that interest? Well, it's emotional.
Yeah. And in that stream of consciousness floating by, say, regards to your relationship, there's thoughts of happily ever after, and there's thoughts of it ending in a horrible way. And whichever one interests you the most, whichever one you care about the most, if you're much more afraid of this relationship ending horribly than you are excited about it being wonderful forever, then that's what will attract you, that you're the worrier kind of person. You start to worry about this relationship going bad. And so that's the thought, that's the star that gets brighter and brighter and brighter.
Right. So I guess one way of talking about this is if we choose to, what's the phrase? Change your mind. Yeah. I'm going to change the way I think. I'm going to look at another set of thoughts. That has to be purposeful. That has to be a conscious decision to do that.
Now we're talking about a different kind of thinking than just that stream going by.
That's right.
This is purposely deciding that I'm going to take that thought and do something.
That's right. And taking some responsibility for the fact that you are not a victim of these thoughts.
Well, people do choose to be victims of those thoughts lots of times.
Well, that's the great irony and the catch-22 in this. It becomes a chicken and an egg thing then, if we don't say, wait a minute, yeah, these thoughts created feelings and other thoughts and other feelings and other thoughts, they were seeds, but in the beginning, why am I interested and why do I care? And there's a lot of identity bound up in those motives.
That's right.
And so to consciously say, I'm going to think more positively. I'm going to be more of an optimist. I'm going to be more goal-oriented. I want to be more purposeful in my thinking, is to go to, I think, this next stage, the second stage, the idea that as we've said, against the set of all possible thoughts and the parts that we see, the constellation of thoughts, the mental drift that even if we don't think we're thinking is still going on in the background.
That's an important concept. From the moment we awaken in the morning till the moment we go unconscious, that's always there.
Right.
That's always there. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it's there because we're so focused on some one thing, but it's back there. It's always there.
And that's why we feel so victimized. But remember, the particular thoughts that seem to demand our attention, that we sometimes feel like we're victims of, still, in fact, how can we emphasize this? It's our stuff. It's about us.
You're holding on. That's why you've got that going over and over again.
Exactly. Other people, when they lay down and look at the stars, may have different constellations that appear to them out of that. And so what we perceive is the drift, and then how purposeful are we in following a train of thought or reasoning or seeking an understanding? And to what extent do we recognize that all of it's ultimately about us? We have to account for the objective nature of things and learn to empathize with other people, but it all depends upon taking responsibility. It's funny, the political... the politics of being responsible has, to some people, come to mean you're on your own, the government's not going to help you, you're responsible. We're not talking about that. We're talking about understanding the role that you play in thinking and feeling and acting the way you do, and
being responsible is
exactly
what we're talking about.
We're not victims of our thoughts.
No, although people play that role on occasion. So there's this stream of consciousness. There's this ocean of consciousness, ocean of all the possible thoughts. There's your stream, and your stream is full of the kinds of things you're attracted to, basically. So if you're a pessimist, your stream's going to be full of a lot more negative things that it notices in the world and that you think about. And if you're a big-time optimist, if you're a Pollyanna optimist, you're not even going to notice those really bad things in the world. If you're a realistic optimist, then you're going to notice the bad things, but you're going to put more of your attention on the good things, and there'll be more good things floating by your stream of consciousness. Right. But when it comes to the purposeful thinking, that is... See, I think an optimist's mental drift is much more enjoyable than a pessimist's mental drift, but each of them has the ability to pick any thought out of that mental drift, a positive one or a negative one, because even though the optimist has more positive, he still has some negative, or she still has some negative, and vice versa. So here's the intelligent part, right? Is the structured, purposeful thought. I pick that thought to focus on. So if it's a negative thought or a positive thought, your choice, I pick that thought to focus on. And if it interests me, that is, if it evokes emotion in me, positive or negative, fear or love, then I'm going to stick with it. And the more emotion, the more I'm going to stick with it. The longer I'm going to stick with it. The longer my attention span will be with it, the more passion it evokes. And I can direct that thought and go places where I can solve a problem with it, or I can invent something with it, or I can understand somebody better with it. I can purposely use that thing I picked out of that stream and go with it and grow.
Yes, and grow toward what? Toward a higher sense of self. You'll hear us talk about a literal breakthrough to a whole new you. When we talk about finding yourself, it's not rediscovering, other than some of the joy and the inner peace that children have. There's certainly that. But it's a breakthrough to your better sense, to your more creative nature, to the more spiritual values, more kind, more forgiving, more loving. The benefits of coming to paradise and thinking about thinking in the way we're describing it today, the way this unfolds, those benefits are so great and so all-encompassing as to constitute this literal breakthrough to the higher self, to the authentic nature of who we really are, beyond the roles that we play and the characters that we pretend to be.
And not somebody we once were, somebody we've had glimpses of maybe throughout our lives, when all of a sudden parts of us just sort of shone through, or our better nature appeared, But no,
you had a great idea, or that poem came through already thought out.
In that moment, when you feel like you just channeled it somehow. That's what we're talking about. People have had glimpses, but the idea is to be able to go there and to be there and to understand that that's the self we're talking about. It's not an old you, it's a new you, it's a brand new you. And that self is able to be the one to purposefully think. You know, I mean, that's the one that can take your thoughts and do great things with your thoughts. Now, if you're a pessimist and you are willing to take responsibility that you can choose to be an optimist now by purposely thinking positive thoughts inside your mental drift. Like when your mental drift's going by of all the negative stuff and some positive stuff, it's mostly negative maybe, but there's some positive stuff in there. I hope, you know, if you're redeemable at all as a pessimist, you got some. So choose to pick out the positive stuff and amplify it. Choose to pick out the fact that your wife really does love you. Choose to pick out the thought that golden retriever puppies are cute and cuddly to hold. Choose to pick out the fact that, you know, that's a gorgeous mountain. I don't care what mood I'm in. That is a damn gorgeous mountain. Choose to pick from your mental flow with purposeful thought. And all of a sudden, now, because of the law of attraction or whatever name you want, the reticular activating formation, whatever you want, consciousness following, all of a sudden you start to notice more positive things. And you, through purposeful thinking, have directed this autopilot, what seems like autonomic stream of consciousness flow.
That's right. You're more likely to attract other thought forms, other ideas, other ways of thinking that build upon this new, improved way of thinking.
Right. So when you think a thought, you pick something out of the stream of consciousness, choosing it, you know, of all the possible thoughts that are going by you, you get to pick which one you want to focus on. Pick the best one, the happiest one, the one that's most success-oriented or whatever, and then choose. Like if it's a star in the sky, choose to turn up the brightness knob on that star, you know. Or if it's a song, choose to turn up the volume of the song. Make that one more important. Make it real important. You picked out this good one; it's the best one of all of them. Make it really big and important to you. Add the volume, and then all of a sudden, everything related to that becomes brighter in the sky, and you start to notice things that lead you to that kind of thing. And the other thing that happens is as you start to become purposeful in your thoughts. And I think this is so powerful, is that when the bad thoughts do come up, and you want them to, you want the good thoughts and the bad thoughts to come up, because that way you get to really understand yourself. This is all about self-exploration, self-discovery. When the bad thoughts do come up, you get to release them. You get to actually physically, instead of holding on to them like you tightly hold on to something by increasing your muscular tension and holding your breath, you get to actually have those thoughts and release them, literally release them, by releasing your body's muscular tension and by releasing your breath and moving from feeling endangered, like tight muscles ready to run, mouth dry, to feeling safe with muscles loose, not ready to run at all, ready to relax, and the mouth, you know, wet and your body feeling, you know, like it doesn't want to go anywhere. It's happy right here. You know, you move into that state. That's the key.
I like this idea of thoughts as constellations, and you've implied it without actually saying it, that we could draw our own constellations. We could create our own.
You didn't merely infer that. I did indeed imply it.
Okay. That there are other ways of looking at things. We could say, oh, look at this constellation here. I just invented it. It's a group of stars, and every time I look at it, it's going to mean something wonderful and positive to me.
Yeah, that's so much fun.
We are less a victim of our thoughts than we are of our thought patterns and belief systems and attitudes. And again, that's like the menu or the set of all possibilities.
Say that again. We are not as much our thoughts as the attitudes. I mean, that's...
And belief systems. And the
big.
patterns
That's
in the
big.
way we think. And if we can become the person that looks at those patterns, looks at those attitudes. Let's take race or gender as an example. We have a man of mixed race, essentially a man of color, and we have a woman, the former First Lady, Senator from New York. They're both senators and United States U.S. senators.
You've just dated the show to the last part of the first decade of the 21st century.
I'll admit it.
There
It's
you go.
June of 2008 as we record this.
Yes.
If we're honest with ourselves and at all interested or involved, that sort of you have to be interested. To what extent am I attitudes and belief systems a sexist or a misogynist when I look at Hillary? The things about Hillary that I don't like is that, would I feel that same way about a man acting in the same way?
How much of that is the female thing? You got to be honest to ask yourself that question and to answer it. And if you say none at all, zero, then stop to think, what kind of attitude is that? You're saying you're immune from the male-female thing in your thoughts? I don't think it could be zero in anybody's mind.
We don't want to be
exactly
ignorant. That just means to ignore.
Right.
Stephen Colbert does a funny thing about race. He keeps saying, I'm colorblind, I don't notice. Well, that's not somebody who has a healthy attitude about race. That's somebody who's in denial and playing a game and pretending, which is why it's funny when he does it. But issues of race are so institutionalized and go beyond the personal that a conscious woman or man, regardless of color, has to look at these issues and account for their particular thought systems and patterns. And where did I get that? And why do I believe that's true? And so on.
I was talking to a guy yesterday who I'd never met before, who said essentially that his thoughts and his feelings were the same thing. He didn't know any difference between the two and couldn't discern that there was any difference between the two. But very clearly, he was saying that your thoughts are pretty much predetermined. I mean, like, you don't like women because your parents didn't like women and you got it from somewhere. Most people can't change it because they never know that it's coming from somewhere else, and there may be some truth to that. But basically, he's saying, you are what you are, right.
And those thoughts exist. True or false is irrelevant. Those thoughts and beliefs exist in this set of all possible thoughts, this rain cloud of knowable things. But for him to attach to them, to see that constellation when he looks up, to validate them and verify them and never really check to see if they're true or not, that would be the lowest example, a very low number on the scale of purposeful thinking.
Yeah, for example, he said to me that black children in New Orleans have the same educational opportunity as white kids in Beverly Hills because they both get the same book.
Well,
and I said, but even if they did,
right.
The black kid grew up in a house that never had a book, never saw a book. His parents don't know how to read, and they don't. And maybe this white kid grew up in a place where his parents love to read. And every day he envies his parents for being able to read. This is the same educational opportunity. Come on, again, that's not purposeful thinking. That's spouting back what we're told. And it's real important. A part of the mental drift, a big part of the mental drift, is all that stuff you were told. And if that just keeps coming out without you checking it out, that's not what we're talking about when we say purposeful thinking.
And to call that heritage, and to say I'm carrying on the tradition of my family or whatever, I suppose, and there's merit to that in certain situations, but if it's just, I refuse to grow, I refuse to learn, I refuse to think in other ways, for whatever reason, that's a kind of rigidity, a crystallization, or sometimes in philosophy, concretization,
right,
that forces life to crush you.
Right.
How else is life going to help you grow if it doesn't crush you when you get rigid? I know there are philosophies, certain religions, for example, where they say things like an open mind is the devil's playground. You're not supposed to have an open mind. You're not supposed to think for yourself. Well, I'm challenging you, if that's part of your matrix of thoughts, if that's in your thought stream, in your belief system, I'm not going to tell you it's right or wrong. I'm going to tell you to take another look at that. Because there may be some merit in learning to think for yourself. Indeed, some higher identity, a sense of the self that's doing the search, a higher level of respect, and I'm talking self-respect and self-love and self-trust from the one who is willing to think for herself or for himself. That's such an exciting breakthrough to get out of this mold.
It's a whole breakthrough. I mean, most people are thinking, I think, I can't control my thoughts. They just go, I have this stream of consciousness, and they relate to that. They understand that. And I think they're even getting maybe the idea that they can pick one of those thoughts and choose to pay attention to it. I mean, that makes perfect sense also. But what they're not getting, I guess, what most people don't get, is that the stream of consciousness thoughts are just thoughts submitted for your approval, just ideas drifting by. You're good at bad ones, good ones, true ones, false ones, every possible one. You think things that are wrong all the time. You have ideas you think are true or not true. So all kinds of stuff are out there. And the part that picks the things, the part that focuses on the purposeful part, that focuses on the things, that's where you have the power. Because you get to, out of everything in the stream, I mean, everything's in the stream, good stuff, bad stuff. Your stream, if you've been a pessimist, may have a lot more bad stuff than good stuff, but come on, there's still some good stuff. You have, with purposeful thought, the ability to go into that stream and grab any of those positive thoughts. But here's the big question. If that's true, why don't you? I mean, why doesn't that automatically happen? What does it take to get that purposeful thought part to go into that stream and pick the good stuff? And that's the other thing we're talking about today, which we've called awareness.
Yeah, this is the third part. And this is really the payoff to all of this. Look, if we've talked in the first two sections today about the existence of this set of all possible thoughts, this matrix, this ocean, this constellation of 1 billion stars, and how the thought stream is basically your subjective and personal point of view of that matrix, which constellations you see. And secondly, this idea of being more conscious of how you apply your thinking toward a purpose, understanding who you are, solving a problem, attaining a goal, indeed finding meaning in your life. The third bit has to be you're not either of the first two. You are much more than either of the first two. You are the part that can distinguish yourself from the matrix or the purpose.
That's huge. I mean, to me, that's the breakthrough to the new you. That's the thing. So there is this stream of consciousness, which is part of the ocean of consciousness, but it's your stream. It's the constellations you see. It's the ones you attract. It's got good stuff and bad stuff in it. If you're a pessimist, it's got more bad stuff. If you're an optimist, it's got more good stuff. It's in there. You have a part that can pick from that stream a conscious part, choose from the stream if you want to. If you don't let it just go on autopilot like it will, you can choose from that stream anything you want to choose, okay? And the part that does that choosing is a part of thinking. It's the applied thinking or the purposeful thinking. But the point is, you are not the stream of consciousness, and you are not the purposeful thinking. You are the thinker who is aware of the fact that there is a stream of consciousness and can direct this purposeful thinking part to go pay attention to certain things. I think that's the biggest thing people need to get, is that, yes, there's all these thoughts going on. Some are good, some are bad. Don't believe everything you think. There's all these feelings going on. Well, you can believe everything you feel. Just don't act on everything you feel inappropriately. But more importantly, there's this thing that goes in and grabs some of those thoughts and with emotion stays with them, and without emotion lets them go. There's a part of you that does that selectively attends to some of the thoughts in your streams of consciousness, picks which one. But that's not who you are, and that's the important concept. That's not who you are. The part that picks those thoughts is just one more thing of who you are. You're also a body, and you're also emotions, and you're also intuition, and you're also something that adjusts your temperature. You're also a lot of things, including you are a stream of consciousness and a part that picks out of that stream of consciousness. But what you are is the awareness that you're all of these parts and all of these things.
I got an email from one of our listeners recently that started with the sentence, "I hate my life." Pretty straightforward.
Brings up that Eckhart Tolle line, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you know exactly where I'm going to go with it.
I did.
You know, is she the life she hates, or is she the one that hates the life she's been leading?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be or not to be. That's exactly where Shakespeare was going, you know?
That's right.
I mean, so that is the question. It's like,
Which bee are you willing to be?
Yeah. Or what was it? Not Ray Davies, his brother. Dave Davies said it. If you're fooling yourself, then who's fooling who? Right. I love that line. Right. From the Kinks, by the way. I know it's an old reference. It's not modern and up to date, but nobody said it any better than that. If you're fooling yourself, then who's fooling who? There is a part of you, if you hate yourself, there's a part of you that is the self that you hate, and there's a part of you that's obviously above that and recognizes, I deserve more than that. I deserve to have a self I don't hate.
Or even simpler, when we argue with ourselves, we all have these internal dialogues from time to time, sometimes very passionate internal dialogues, conflicts of interest where we're pulled in seemingly opposite directions. Well, most people see that in terms of which is the real me or which is the right thing to do. Well, if you take a breath and relax and close your eyes and come with us to paradise, you will find which self it is. And it's neither of these two that are arguing. It's a self that stands above from an elevated, higher perspective.
And recognize you guys were arguing. You're arguing with yourself.
And can much better see the relative merits of each argument and how to resolve that conflict in a harmonious way.
Yes. When you fight with yourself, then neither of those boxers is you.
Yeah, that's right.
You are the referee, if you will, or you are the fan observing, or what. But you're not either one of those fighting. And that's so important, that you're not your thoughts. You're not your stream of consciousness. You're not a bad person because your stream of consciousness is mostly bad stuff. You're not a good person because your stream of consciousness is mostly good stuff. Because there's, you know what? Once you get into I'm a good person or I'm a bad person, I'm superior or inferior to other people, then you're really off into some ego place. My stream of consciousness contains all the possible thoughts, so does yours. The ones I've attracted are because of my environment and because of all kinds of things that have happened in my life. I'm going to choose now with my consciousness to direct my purposeful thinking part to focus more on the good stuff. That does not mean ignore the bad stuff.
No.
It means
different constellations.
Yes, they're all up there. I see them all, but I'm going to focus more on the ones that I want. Because I know if I focus on what I don't want, if I worry, that's what focusing on what you don't want is. If I worry, I'm more likely to see that constellation become brighter and brighter. And if I focus on solutions, if I focus on what I do want, I'm more likely to see that constellation, even if I couldn't see it before, even if the stars weren't bright enough to see. If I'm focusing on a possible future solution, then those stars become brighter, and that's a constellation I start to see.
This is the greatest irony of all, that life, in all senses, becomes, to varying degrees, but in all senses, a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It does.
A series of self-fulfilling prophecies. So the pessimist will magnetize or generate plenty of evidence why he should continue to be a pessimist.
Absolutely, because in that stream of consciousness, more negative stuff, you know, and he will claim, or she will claim, that the world contains more negative stuff, and that may or may not be true. Right. But certainly in their stream of consciousness is more negative stuff.
Right. Imagine my argument with a fellow once on the telephone. He identified himself as a drug dealer, and we talked about, you know, my idealism and what he called his realism as a drug dealer. And at one point he said, I didn't make this world. I didn't invent it.
Yes, you did.
And after an appropriate pause, I suggested that, from my point of view, yes, you did.
Yeah. Yeah, you were not genetically engineered to be a drug dealer. You know, I mean, this is a choice, a series of choices you made.
Yeah, he didn't see that he had to do this.
But just like the black kid who goes to school with the school book and never learned to read because, you know, there are circumstances, environmental circumstances that make it very difficult for different people. But you know, that's we can overcome that if we have the choice. So there's the point now. The point is that no matter what you're seeing in your stream of consciousness, it does have good stuff in it. And if you choose, with your awareness of the way the life works now, to be the thinker of your thoughts, you're going to be, and you're going to pick which ones of those things that are going by your stream.
Consciously choose
which ones that are going by in that stream you want to focus on most. And you know that the way to make sure you stay with those is to amp up the emotion,
right,
to feel more passionate, to feel more excited, to feel more enthusiastic, to feel more sure this is the right thing for you to be thinking about. Right. The more emotion you feel, the more you focus your passion, the more your passion gets focused, and the more you are going to stay there. So that's the whole basic idea. And then you start to think the way you would rather think. You start to be the way you'd rather be. Thinking is both automatic. I mean, there is that stream of consciousness that's going to be going by. And like we said, it's always happening. It's always there. Sometimes loud, sometimes quiet, sometimes full of junk from television commercials and from stupid places. Sometimes you get a song like "It's a Small World After All" in your head and it goes on for hours. You know, but that drift, that stuff going on, you don't have that much responsibility for that stuff. I mean, it comes from everywhere. But what you can become responsible for with awareness is the part we're calling purposeful thinking, the part that gets to pick from that stream what it wants to focus on, and it gets to add emotion to the thought of that thing to make sure we stay with it. And that's focused passion, and that's consciousness, and that's how you wake up.
And we might suggest even that's the next stage of evolution for humanity.
I believe that to be true.
If we've gone from, well, hunting and gathering to agrarian to industrial to this computer information age, what's next? How about an age where some significant number of women and men recognize and celebrate and teach others how to be more conscious and aware, whether you call that accountability or responsibility, or just recognizing this basic concept that, yeah, you are what you eat, and of course you're how you feel, and your thoughts contain your identity, but there's a self that stands above all three of those, if you will, a spiritual self or a higher self. Steve said it before, you've had glimpses of it when you know the right thing to do. You have within consciousness a conscience. You have a code of ethics. You know right from wrong. There are other thoughts that might argue against it, but who do you want to be? One of those field of thoughts with that habitual attraction toward the same patterns and belief systems, the same constellations, or one who evolves, one who refines their nature, who looks for the better parts of themselves and focuses on those.
You know, it struck me as really sort of mysterious how we've seemingly abandoned our quest for outer space, but I think it's because we realize as a species the next step is to go to inner space, and I think that's where we need to go now. We'll do an audio journey, we'll take you to inner space, and we'll talk about the consciousness of being able to direct the purposeful thinking part of your process onto the stream of consciousness in ways that benefit you the most. So we're talking about thinking about thinking. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And as you release, feel inside yourself a sense of peace.
Feeling safe, you can easily experience the feeling of letting go in your body, muscles unwinding, muscles relaxing, and you drop your guard, you lower your defenses, maybe reflecting for just a few moments on the fact that there's nothing to guard or defend for the next few minutes. You don't need that. You can have it later. You get out into the world, out on the freeway, driving around you.
It's very safe here.
You may want some of that, but yeah, right now. In fact, you can almost feel yourself as if slowly walking down the staircase, becoming more and more relaxed and even safer.
Even safer there.
As you go deeper and deeper down the staircase.
As there becomes here, in this safe place.
And feel the letting go.
And feel the letting go. And in this place, you can be the thinker of your thoughts, the awareness that you have thoughts. So for the moment, allow your part of the ocean of consciousness, the stream that you perceive, to drift by. Take a few moments and observe the drifting of your stream of consciousness, of all the possible thoughts you could think next. Just notice which ones in the next few moments of all the possible thoughts that you could think next, just notice which ones come floating down your stream of consciousness. Take a few moments and be aware of your stream.
A beautiful stream in a beautiful place of perfect peace, an idyllic paradise, where you find yourself by realizing that you're not simply the one who thinks, but essentially the one who chooses particular thoughts, patterns of thinking, attitudes, and belief systems. Take this stream that Steve has suggested that you experience as the mental drift. And imagine it's shallow enough that you can slowly wade upstream or downstream. And as you're going with the stream or into the stream, whatever feels best for you and most appropriate now, notice that you could pick up little stones or pebbles in the bottom of the stream.
The ones that get your attention.
Yeah, the ones that you're attracted to for whatever reason. And you could study them, and you could hold them and keep them, and pick up some more and hold them and keep them, or toss some away, or even some you've held for quite a period of time. You could always toss away, for there certainly seems to be no shortage of little stones in this thought stream.
And so with the part of you that is purposeful, the part of you that can choose from all those thoughts, the one you wish to attend to, allow that part of you that chooses your thoughts, which ones to attend to, which ones to be interested in, which ones to notice and stick with. Pick one, any one. And notice how as you find it more and more interesting, more and more fascinating, more and more exciting, as you get more and more enthusiastic about it, as it becomes more and more wondrous and awe-inspiring, how easy it is to stay with this thought.
I'd also like to suggest that you check your backpack. I think there's some rocks or stones, little pebbles, some might be pretty big, that you've been carrying around back there for a long, long time. Some you've been carrying so long that you don't even remember where they came from. And some, well, some are not just thoughts, but patterns, belief systems.
And some of them, like stuff left in the freezer way too long, you don't even know what they are anymore. You just know looking at them, they ain't it. They're not. That's not it.
Well, if
now's
there's
the time to release.
Yes, indeed. And if there's a few in here you'd like to continue to carry, that's fine too. But the rest of them, boy, I just dump them back in the river, for there is no shortage of pebbles in this river.
You do that by literally grabbing the pebble and releasing the pebble as you release the muscle tension in your body and release your breath and release all feelings of fear as you envelop yourself in a feeling of safety. That's how you release. You take the pebble that attached to the thought. You release the pebble, you release your breath, you release your tension, you release everything that feels dangerous and just feel flooded with a feeling of safe.
And you can do this for the most practical daily problems in your life and affairs. But always leave room for doing this in the field that is self-exploration and realization. Take a look at those stones that we tend to carry that represent self-loathing and negative thinking about ourselves, the critical nature. The idea that there's some benefit or comfort even in saying things to yourself like, well, that's because I'm stupid. Or, you know, my memory is so bad I'd forget my head if it wasn't screwed on. Or, you know, I always get a cold or a flu. About this time of year, I usually get sick. I guess that'll be coming. Or like we said the other day, hey, boss, you wouldn't want to give me a raise, would you? And consider that you don't have to carry those with you. Think for yourself. Question the authority that is implied in these belief systems and these attitudes and these concepts. Be the one that questions your thinking. Be the one that explores your feelings. Detach. Let go. Be safe enough to rise above, seeking your better nature.
There is an ocean of thoughts floating by you as a stream. Neither one is you. There's a part of you that can pick from that stream of consciousness and focus on the good stuff and be an optimist, or focus on the bad stuff and be a pessimist. A part of you that can pick from that stream of consciousness positive choice instead of a negative one, a purposeful thought. There's a part of you that can do that, but that's not who you are. You are the part that directs the purposeful thought process. You are the part that says to yourself, think this, choose this thought of all the thoughts there are. Focus on this thought, pick this thought, and put passion into this thought. You are the chooser of all those thoughts there are. You are the one that chooses which one to direct your thinking to think about. So all kinds of bad, terrible, horrible thoughts may go through your mind in your stream of consciousness, and they're just thoughts. They're not you. They don't tell you who you are. They're just thoughts that float by. The ones you see brightest, that you attach to, you can release if they are negative. You can attach more intensely if they're positive. But remember, neither the thoughts that float by nor the part that picks the thoughts and pays attention to them is who you are. It's the chooser. Not the thinking, but the thought about thinking. The awareness, the consciousness, the awake you.
There is much more to the idea of self as consciousness or awareness and the role of conscience and your better, higher nature within it. But at the beginning of self-realization, discovery and development of your authentic nature, the idea that I am the one that chooses is a real good place to begin. To be more conscious. I am the one that chooses. There's much more than that, but it depends upon that. If instead you choose to be a victim, then you are a victim and you've given up choice. Though even if you choose not to choose, you've still made a choice. Don't let that be such a troubling riddle. You are the one that chooses.
Yes, and as that chooser, choose now to take a deep breath and bring yourself back to wide awake.
Feeling fine, rested, refreshed, relaxed, feeling really good, as if you had 8 hours of healthy, natural sleep. How's that for a suggestion?
That feels wonderful. And remember, there's an ocean of thoughts. All the possible thoughts must be somewhere, right? All the thoughts everybody ever thought or ever could think about, they're somewhere, a thought or unthought. That's not what's going through your mind. There's a certain stream that's going through your mind, and that has a lot to do with what your environment has been and what you've noticed. But even in that stream, there's all kinds of good stuff and all kinds of bad stuff, no matter which way you've looked at the world. So you do have another part that picks from that stream, that picks the good stuff or picks the bad stuff. But remember, who you are is the part that directs that part to pick the good stuff or the bad stuff.
And that's most obvious to you when you go to paradise, when you relax into these alpha brainwave levels between awake and asleep, this closed eye process that we celebrate every week with these audio journeys. That's the paradise, and that's where you find the authentic self. So you'll have to do a lot of thinking in normal consciousness, and about a third of the day you're asleep and dreaming, but there is this wonderful paradise in the middle, which is where you're going to get a lot more clarity. And again, choose to be the chooser. It's really fun and exciting, and we'll have many more practical techniques about how this plays out in your life. But we want to be sure you get your friends on board with the Finding Yourself in Paradise podcast. So again, we ask you to wage some inner peace, to bring your friends to FocusedPassion.com. Remember the ED. Get them signed up just like you signed up for 99 cents a week for these roughly 1 hour podcasts. And every one of these programs contains a guided imagery, exercise, and audio journey to help you really understand and install in these states of expanded awareness the lessons of the week.
Absolutely. The very first time I ever thought about thinking was in my place of paradise.
I'll bet.
So go there, wage inner peace, and we'll have a wonderful time doing so. Remember, there's good thoughts and bad thoughts, and they aren't who you are. There's a part that picks which thoughts to attend to, and that's not who you are either. Who you are is the part that chooses to tell that part that picks which ones to pick. And if you don't choose to do that, if you leave that on autopilot, you'll make the same choices you made last time. You'll pick the same kinds of thoughts to attend to you always thought. You are a creature of habit unless you become aware and choose to choose.
Get the big picture? The more often we do that, the more likely we are to live there. As always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Bennett.
The thought that life could be better is woven indelibly into our hearts and our brains.